Hello, greetings to everybody. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're watching this recorded video. Now, for today's video, we are going to talk about the next lesson for the next or the second half of the semester, which talks about the lesson 6, specifically the different writings of Dr. Jose Rizal. For the first part, I shared to you all about the basic information about Dr. Jose Rizal, his life, his education, his family, and who are the people behind his successes and his struggles during the Spanish colonization. For this time, I'll be sharing to you the different important contribution when it comes to the different literary pieces or writings of Dr. Jose Rizal. And so we all know that Dr. Jose Rizal have made a great contribution to the awakening of the minds and awakening of the consciousness of the Filipino people before. And that is giving the drive to all the Filipino people to go against the Spanish rulers in the Philippines and during his time. And so there was this sorry, there was this writer who is also a historian in the time of the Spanish regime, which who explain all the different undertakings, happenings during the Spanish colonization, the ideals during those times. And so Rizal would like to contradict or made a note or a contribution or a remark or a comment to his um, writing. And so we come up with this what we call annotation of Antonio's Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. But of course, we would like to know what is annotation. Okay, who among you here have you heard about an annotation? What do you think of this word annotation? Is it a process? Okay, yes, it is a process because it involves a process of putting your remarks or notes or placing an explanation or a comment added to a certain text. Okay, and I also would like to emphasize that when words are being attached, aside from it is, most especially if it is a verb, no? The root word niya is a verb, then it is attached with the suffix ion, so it entails a process. Sorry, a process. Say, for example, the word investigation. No, from the word investigation comes from the verb word investigate. Okay, meaning to say that is the process of inquiry, of investigating. Okay, so which means to say that it functions as a noun, and that it since the word annotation um, speaks of a note or a comment or a note of explanation or a comment that is added to a text of Antonio Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Okay, but the annotation, it means to add notes. Okay, a note meaning annotate. Okay, the note there meaning that is the act of noting or replacing a remark or a comment to the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas by Antonio Morga. But later on, we would like to know who is Antonio Morga and what is his contribution to the Philippine regime or to the Philippine, the Spanish regime in the Philippines, the Spanish colonization of the Spaniards in the Philippines. Okay, this is Antonio de Morga Sanchez Garay. He is a Spanish soldier, a lawyer, and belong to or who has who has a high-ranking colonial official for 43 years in the Philippines, New Spain, and Peru, where he was president of the Real Audiencia for 20 years. Actually, he was a historian. In fact, he wrote a lot of books, and one of those books um, is Successes Las Filipinas, explaining to that book, explaining that all um, the happenings and the beautiful side of this Spanish colonization. Okay, the effects, the beautiful effects on the Spanish colonization. Okay, for Antonio de Morga, Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, he was actually recognized as a first-hand account of Spanish colonial venture in Asia during the 16th century. Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas is actually a book that is based on Antonio de Morga's personal experiences and other documentations from eyewitnesses of the events, such as the survivors of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi's Philippine expedition. Familiar ba with Miguel Lopez de Legazpi? He is a conqueror. That was the time of the Spanish colonization. Okay, this book, um, okay, this one, The Successes de las Islas Filipinas, was published in 1609 by Antonio de Morga. All right. It was a written material, no, which was considered as one of the most important works of the early history of the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. It was published in 1609 after Antonio de Morga really was reassigned to Mexico in two of the times by Casa de Jeronimo Bali in Mexico City. And, the first English translation was published in London, and another English translation was Blair and Robertson, and it was published in Cleveland. So, by these facts, this book is actually popularized or distributed to different areas around the globe. That is to give to share the happenings in the Philippines during the Spanish colonization. This kind of work greatly emphasized or impressed the Philippine national hero Dr. Rosa Rizal, and he decided to annotate and published a new edition and began working on it in London when Dr. Rosa went to London, and completing it in Paris in 1890. But the thing is, Dr. Antonio de Morga is the author of the Las Islas Filipinas, and he is one of the first books ever tackled about the Philippine history at that time. Okay, so we should presume that he belongs to the well-educated individual in the Philippines. And that kind of book that you are going to produce describes inside and outside of the country what is happening in the Philippines. And it consists of 8 chapters and discusses the political, we have social and economical aspects of the Spaniards. Okay, and of course, the content of the book is based on what the Dr. Antonio de Morga's observations and personal experiences. Okay, and so why did or what are the reasons or what are the purposes of Dr. Rosa Rizal's of annotating this Successes de las Islas Filipinas? Number one is he wanted to awaken the consciousness of the Filipinos regarding their glorious ways of the past. Okay. Second is to correct what has been distorted about the Philippines due to Spanish conquest, which means to say that since he wanted to correct, which means to say that there is something wrong with the Spanish colonization. Okay, and the third one is he wanted to prove that Filipinos are civilized even before the coming of the Spaniards. So let's try to see in this recorded video how did Dr. Rizal awaken, correct, and proved that Filipinos are really existing. Okay, we have our own culture prior to, or we have our own lives prior to the Spanish regime. Okay, so we can identify right from this moment that there are a lot of reasons why Philippines was better in pre-colonial Philippines. I mean to say pre-colonial colonization. I mean before colonizing the Philippines. before colonizers coming into our area. This information is coming from a site that is also legible. I mean, legit, that really speaks of what is the beauty before, no, during it, the after effects, or even during the Spanish regime, women enjoyed equal status with men. Okay. During pre-colonial times, women shared equal footing with men in society. They were allowed to divorce, own and inherit property, and even lead their respective barangays or territories. In matters of family, the women were all intents and purposes the working heads, possessing the power of the purse and their sole right to name their children. And they could, dictate the terms of their marriage and even retain their maiden names if they choose to do so. So technically, men before, women before enjoyed what can men can do and exercise. In fact, during these times, people or Filipinos before also trace their heritage to both their father and their mother. And in fact, it could be said that the pre-colonial Philippines was largely matriarchal. So, after, to say, during the Spanish colonization, most of the decisions are coming from men, patrimony. For prior to the colonization of the Spaniards, more or less, hindi siya more or less, but closest to the reality that they enjoyed these equal rights. Okay, because those times, no, pre-colonial times, women holding great weights in the matter of politics. They can lead a barangay, they can lead an area, and of course in possessing or in leading rituals. Okay, in fact, when it comes to rituals, no, there were men who are, women who lead the rituals, and we call them the babaylans. Remember of the babaylans? Technically, prior to the colonization of the Spaniards in the Philippines, women enjoyed equal status with men. In fact, there were um, there were studies, no, there were published materials that already claiming that even before, women can actually lead into a mass. We call them as priestesses or priestess. For male, or for men, we call them as priests, okay, which is visibly or apparently we are seeing them in different churches. We have pastors, we have priests, but prior to this colonization of the Spaniards, we have priestesses or priestess. Okay, the women who leads into a prayer, the babaylans. Okay, so this is a kind of a show of showing of respect to both sexes, no, both gender. Men were even required to walk behind their wives, and this largely progressively society that elevate women to such a high pedestal took a serious blow when the Spanish came. And of course, um, eager to impose that what we call patriarchal system, the Spanish relegated women to the homes, demonized the Babylonians as satanic, and ingrained into our forefathers' heads that women should be like Maria Clara, the demure one, the self-effacing, the powerless. Okay, so it instilled the people, the friars before, instilled in the minds of our forefathers that there must be a limitation to women. Okay, but um, as of today, we have many development programs elevating the rights and equal rights of women and men in the society. Okay, so another one is society was more tolerant in pre-colonial Philippines. In what way? In what way? While it could be said that our modern society is one of the most tolerant in the world, we owe our open-mindedness not to the Americans and certainly not to the Spanish, but to the pre-colonial Filipinos. In what way? Because aside from allowing divorce, women back then also had a say in how many children they wanted. Sexuality was not as suppressed, and no premium was given to virginity before marriage. Although polygamy was practiced, men were expected to do so only if they could support that love each other for his wives equally. Homosexuals were also largely tolerated, seeing as how much on the Babylons were actually men in drag. And surprisingly, with the amounts of sexual freedom, no prostitution existed during the pre-colonial days. In fact, some literature or the books published, the different written materials published suggested that the American period, which heavily emphasized on what we call capitalism and profiteering, introduced this kind of idea of prostitution into the country as a massive scale. And it's not because of the Spaniards, and it's not because of the pre-colonial people or Filipinos. Okay, so different colonizer who introduced us this kind of prostitution. Okay, so next reason why life is better in pre-colonial Philippines is the people enjoyed a higher form of government. In what way? Okay, what about this one? The relationship between the ruler on this subject was very simple back then. In return for his protection, the people may pay tribute and serve him both in times of war and peace. Of course, going by the evidences, no, we could say that our ancestors already practiced an early version of what we call the social construct. Social construct is actually a theory by prominent thinkers. We have Thomas Hobbes, John Locke. If you are familiar with these people, no? We have Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which exposed the view that rulers owe the right to rule on the basis of the people's consent. What do you mean by this one? Now, if the ruler became corrupt or incompetent, no, then the people had the right to remove him. Okay, that's being socially constructed. And that's exactly the kind of government our ancestors had. Although the datus, are you familiar with the datus? They are the ones who ruled, or the male one who ruled politically the barangay. No? They are, I mean, technically came from the upper classes, and he could be removed from his position by the lower classes if they found him wanting of his duties. Also, anyone, including women, could become the datu based on their merits, such as we have um, being brave, having wits, and possessing leadership abilities. So if these women possess bravery, wisdom, and leadership ability, then he could be a datu. Then really people enjoyed a higher form of government. Okay, because sabot-sabot gina sila. 7. Oh, next. We were self-sufficient. In terms of food, our forefathers did not suffer from any lack thereof. Which means to say that they were before, you know, blessed with such a rich country, and they had enough for themselves and their families. Farming, we have agricultural activities, we have forests, rivers, seas. Okay, these nature, yes, these kinds of nature yielded plentiful supplies of meat. We have fish and other foodstuffs. So later on, their diet become more varied, especially when they learn to till the land using farming techniques. And actually, that were quite advanced for their time because they are different farming tools. And in fact, we have the Banawi rice terraces is one of the proof that of our ancestors' ingenuity. No? What's more, that they have an advanced concept of agrarian equity. Men and women equally work in their fields, and anyone could till public lands free of charge, imagine. And also, since they had a little to no concept of exploitation for profit, our ancestors generally took care of the environment well, which means to say that they don't have that concept of dayaan before, because everyone is or are welcome in tilling the lands. Okay, so everybody should take good care of the land. So it will benefit for the common good. Okay, so naayahapon ng camaraderie for everybody. Okay, so such was that kind of abundance of foodstuff that what we called as the um, Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, the most successful Spanish colonizer of the island, if you're familiar with him, no? He said that uh, abundance of rice, we have the fowls and wine, as well as the great numbers of buffaloes, deer, wild boar, and goats, will when he first arrived in Luzon. And since he is a colonizer, a traveler, should I say, he met a lot of beautiful places with the nature, and that he is saying that the Philippines is really in a rich resource, or has a rich resource, or I mean it is it's a rich resource country. Okay, so next is Filipinos were self-sufficient. What do you mean by this one? So all of those things, no, kato de siya, kung giingon, Filipinos were self-sufficient because we have a lot of resources in the Philippines. Next, we had smoother foreign relations. In what way? We've been all thought that before the Spanish galleon trade, if you're familiar with this one, Spanish galleon trade, the trading, the exchanging of goods and services during the Spanish era, the pre-colonial Filipinos had already established trading and diplomatic relations with countries such as far as Middle East countries. In lieu of cash, our ancestors exchanged precious minerals, gold, diamonds, manufactured goods, and coming from the Davao area, the Mindanao area. We also have areas in Luzon who who is manufacturing a lot of food products, no? With exchanging to or with Arabs, we have Chinese, Indians, and even other nationalities. Now, during this time or during this period, many foreigners permanently settled after marveling all the beauty of the country and its people. Out of the foreigners, it was the Chinese who were amazed at the pre-colonial Filipinos, because when they came to the Philippines, they were really mesmerized, and the Filipinos were actually extraordinary honest. Chinese often wrote about the Filipino sincerity and said that were one of their most trusted clientele, since they did not steal their goods and always paid their debts. Imagine. No. In fact, some Chinese, out of confidence, were known to simply leave their items in the beaches to be picked by the Filipinos and traded inland. When they returned, the Filipinos would just give back and give them back and barter the items without any missing at all. Sana all. No? Without getting the item without permission. Okay, so how about these days? How about out during the Spanish colonization? Well, it's a good point to consider. Next is knowledge and skills to make advanced weapon. Are you familiar with lantaka? Okay, we have the lantaka, no? And that kind, in Malay, they called it as rentaka. No? It is actually a type of bronze canyon mounted on merchant vessels, usually mounted in merchant vessels traveling the waterways of the Malay or the Malay archipelago. Its use was greatly or was greatest in pre-colonial Southeast Asia, especially in the Philippines. We have Malaysia, Indonesia, And our ancestors, far from being the archetypal spear-carrying, we have barag or bahag-wearing tribesmen. We picture them to be very, very proficient in the art of war. So aside from wielding swords and spears, they also know how to make and fire guns and cannons. Example, Raha Sulaiman. Uh, he's said to have owned a huge 15 feet long iron canyon. That's why in most of the areas in the Philippines, no, we have canyons already. Okay, labi na sa mga munisipyo. If you could visit your but for the Philippines, preserved gid ang culture during those pre-colonial times. Naagid tayo mga canyon. Okay, so aside from the offensive weapons, our ancestors also knew how to construct huge fortresses and body armors. And the Moros living in the south, for instance, often wore armor that covered them from head to toe. And yes, they also carried guns with them. With all of these weapons in their disposal, the fact that they were good and hand-to-hand combatants, you'd think that Spanish would have been heard or had a harder time colonizing the country. Yes. Sadly, the Spanish cleverly exploited the regionalist tendencies of the pre-colonial Filipinos. This divided and conquer strategy would be the major reason why the Spanish successfully controlled the country for more than 300 years. Okay, there is this kind of attack, diba, kung may tawag, the element of surprise, the element of attack, unknowingly or unconsciously, you are not really aware that you are already colonized. Okay, but because of this um, very a very strategic way of colonizing a country, Philippines, no, the Spaniards are using education, are using the religion, no, and of course other component that somehow would deal to the idea of colonizing a country or an area. So, given the fact that the Philippines had already the Filipinos had already weapons with them. Combatants na sila daan. It's just that because of the wits, because of how the Spaniards worked with the Filipinos before. No, it's just so sad. Another thing is several professions existed. Farmers, being a farmer, hunters, seafarers. Those are the professions that they had, and those are very valuable in day-to-day living. The basic one, but are very significant in their living, in their existing. Okay? Kung hunter ka, if you are in the front row, if you are combatant, then Filipinos before are actually looking forward, looking up to you because you are that strong and brave. Okay, but of these days, napa ba? Yes, napa. We have our very strong and courageous um, military officials, men in uniform, no, who are really striving so hard to keep peace in all forms, in all areas in the Philippines. And that is a very good point to consider, a very significant way of showing the loyalty to the country, to the Philippines. And even when the Filipinos were farmers, hunters, weapon makers, and even seafarers, they've got great contribution to maintain peace and order in the family, in the community that they belong, in the society, and even to the whole country as a whole. Okay, to name a few, no, we have very famous hunters, weapon makers, farmers, agriculturists, seafarers. Many become involved in such professions such as we have mining, textiles, and smithing. And owing to the excellent craftsmanship of the Filipinos, locally produced items such as the pots, imagine the jewels, the jewelry, and the clothing were highly sought in other countries. And in fact, it is reported that products of the Filipino origin might have been reached as far as ancient Egypt. And clearly, our ancestors were really skilled artisans. Okay, so technically we can say that several professions already existed prior to the Spanish colonization. Okay, next one is the literacy rate was actually high. Okay, what about this one? Using the ancient system of writing, if you're familiar, I also share this on my social media accounts, the Baybayin. This is a pre-colonial Filipino system of writing, the Baybayin, and that is um, most especially taught or shared to the Filipinos, educated themselves, very well written, very well used by the Filipinos, so that um, when the Spanish finally arrived, they were shocked to find out that Filipinos possess a literacy rate higher than that of the Madrid in Spain. And however lang, the high literacy rate also proved to be a double-edged sword for the Filipinos once the Spanish arrived. Since eager to evangelize and subjugate our ancestors, the missionaries exploited the baybayin for their own ends, learning and using it to translate their various works. And consequently, the pre-colonial Filipinos became more easily susceptible to foreign influence because we have this kind of attitude now. If that is new to us, we are going to see and we will be mesmerized that what is new and what is the trend. But this was happened during, in this case, that the concept of baybayin was slowly changed into what we have, the alphabet right now, because of the bringing of what we call education in the Philippines. Okay, so dili gid not good in academics. We're not good in reading, in writing. They knew, okay, they knew. However, we have a different system, a writing system, which is a baybayin, and came another set of system brought by the Spaniards, brought by other colonizers in the country. And when somebody is shifting from one system to another system, there is this actually a hindrance in acquiring another language, most especially if it's not innate of a person to adapt to that language. If he is not a first language user, then it has a different, or the person can hardly adapt and adopt the language system to the current system that the society is using. So it's somehow a challenge to Filipinos using this kind of alphabet. So, came in, abot na po dito mga illiteracy, na illiterate kon ang mga Pilipino during the Spanish colonization and even post-Spanish colonization. It is because that really a person or a child cannot get all the systems of writing from baybayin to the alphabet that we have right now. Okay, so mag-adjust gid pag yun. So the teachers, the friars has to adjust. Remember, the friars before are very strict, perennialistic, which means what is written in the book should be followed, which means what is written in the book that they are using, are true, are important, and must be followed. So from the baybayin, which slowly sana, fading to the recent alphabet or writing system. So nalahian yun. Okay? And so the rate was even high. Okay? Next, we have the next one. We already had an advanced civilization. What do you mean by this one? Okay. Contrary to foreign accounts, our ancestors were not just some backward or what we call jungle living savages. In reality, pre-colonial Philippines already possessed a very advanced civilization before the coming of the Spanish. are the Spaniards. Our ancestors possessed a very complex working society and culture replete with works of arts and literature. When the colonizers came, everything contradictory to their own system had to go. Sculptures, examples, texts. We have religious ceremonies, rituals, and rituals and anything else deemed obscene or evil or a threat to the rule and were eliminated. And so, with all the 10 reasons why life was better in pre-colonial Philippines, we can actually conclude that we can only speculate what would have happened with our ancestors and never been colonized if ever were never been colonized in the first place. Although the Spanish era and the American period by extension did have their good points, would it have really been worth it until the end? So somehow it is a question. No? What are the things that happened prior to the Spanish colonization and during the Spanish colonization and post Spanish colonization and the coming of the Americans and until up to this very moment. Okay, so what happened in the country to the Philippines if we were not colonized? What happened to our Filipinos? Okay, all right. So what is would like to give us or to emphasize to us that Rizal gave us that kind of freedom, no, using goodness instead of kaharasan or the sword, using a sword. Okay, and Dr. Rizal became the Philippines national hero because he fought for freedom in a silent but powerful way. He expressed his love for the Philippines through his novels, we have the essays and articles, rather than through the use of force or aggression. Okay? So upon knowing all of those things, no, the gist here is the Philippines was actually a very progressive country prior to the Spanish colonization. I mean, not that really progressive as compared today, but of course, we have, or the Filipinos before have their own lives already. Existed na ang barangay, ang political system, ang economic growth, okay? And it's just that because of the different colonizers, the Philippines are in this shape right now. What are my takeaways about this one? Okay, number one takeaway that we can get out from this topic, no, out from this recorded video is um, to adopt the A and the O, okay, the ADOPT and the ADAPT, to adopt in an environment that is new to us is actually good. Meaning it is to embrace what is new is actually good. Meaning we have our modern technologies nowadays. But it's just that we have to take note of how we responded to that new technology. Okay. We're very overwhelmed with the benefits behind those technologies, the advancement, the faster and the easier way of communicating with other people and doing a lot of stuff, a lot of work over the internet. But of course, we have to take note that our values still remains. I mean to say, when we value, we value time, when we value our family over the phone, over the internet, then it must remain the same, regardless of how we embrace or we get into the nerves of the different technologies. Not by nerves of technology, but embrace. What I'm trying to say is embracing that kind of technology. We have to retain our values. Okay. Second, um, this is what Dr. Sarisal would tell us about his annotation, that really Filipinos, no, if I'm going to go back to his assertions, no, that we have to retain, no, we have to prove that Filipinos are really courageous, strong, and brave in times of struggles and problems. And so, as in this space right now, in these trying times, this is actually a good reminder to everybody to become strong and to go back to what has been shared or imparted to our lives. Sometimes, along the way, makalimot tag unsa gid ay purpose nato of why we came to school, why we are doing all of those things. Sometimes we were allured by the beautiful happenings around, or even the pain that we are experiencing right now. And this is what Dr. Rosario Rizal is, why he is annotating this one. He wanted to, kaan ba? He wanted to give us a glimpse of the pasts before we are going to um, abolish or discriminate or get rid of the Filipinos before the Spanish colonization. And that is the same way of how we should treat ourselves. That is to look, if we are now in the situation, if we are now in the confusion, if we are experiencing confusions and problems, then we have to go back why we are really into this matter, why we are into this course, what is my purpose of going to school, of educating myself, of ourselves, and why we are going to wake up early in the morning and prepare for the classes in Anna. So what about you go back to your purpose? Same with you go back to the history. You go back to what was really happening prior to the Spanish regime. Okay. The last takeaway that I could share to everybody is um Successos de las Islas Filipinas was actually a published material by Antonio de Morga, no? And he is a Spanish ruler. I mean, he is pro-Spanish. Okay. What I'm trying to say is not all that you heard, no, that you have seen are actually true. Sometimes we have to verify the facts. We have to verify the what is really happening in the situation right now. No, I am trying to say that we have to be inquisitive. We have to be and sana, we have to be a person concerning, showing concern to the people around. Not just very lax and very passive. Marabag na atay community involvement as well. Okay, this Successes Las Filipinas talking about the different um, observations of Dr. Morgan in the society during the Spanish regime. And so we have also to reflect on what is really happening in our societies. What can be my contribution? What can be your contribution to the attainment of the goals or objectives of your respective barangays? Okay, what could be your contribution to your family, to your barangay, to the society? So somehow, i-annotate lang tinuod ni siya ni Dr. Rosarisa, but it has a great impact or enlightenment to everybody that really the fact is naanatay life, naanay kinabuhi ang usa ka tawo, ang usa ka Pilipino before the Spanish regime, before the Spanish era. Okay, so those were just my 3 takeaways. I hope I share something about out from this recorded video. I intentionally have this recorded video, DI, because you will be having your FSG seminar or involvement of the different student of all the students are I mean all students are encouraged to join a webinar or a symposium, I guess, or a seminar or open forum. What is the term? I just forgot. Encouraging everybody to attend, of the seminar. Was that a seminar? I guess it's not a seminar, but involvement of the students into a webinar, and it was powered by or sponsored by the FSG. So when I saw the memo, I should have recorded this recorded video for lesson 6. This is the annotation of the Successos de las Islas Filipinas. Okay, so I will not require anything about or any output from this recorded video or a lesson for this recorded video because I believe last last or the first half of the semester, I always required you of an output. Now this time, I am expecting, or I am trimming my requirements of the different outputs into limited outputs lang. That is because I deeply understand that there are a lot of still students in the third year, no, third year level, to who have a difficulty in submitting their outputs. And it's not that I judge your capability in making the outputs, but I just would like to give you an opportunity to do also to reflect into this to these materials, because technically kaning second half of the semester you will be meeting a lot of literary works. I mean selected works lang. Not all of Dr. Sarisal's literary works or selected works, but those were just salient and mga important information lang of Dr. Sarisal's works. Okay? And I believe this is a reflective approach. I mean, I just wanted you to reflect. I just wanted you to recall and reflect, more about introspection, looking up to yourself, and if you could have a good value, a values, for example, and sometimes we have to reflect also the life of Dr. Rosa Rizal and apply all of these concepts to our lives. And technically, that is the essence of GEC-LWR subject. Okay, that's the life and works of Dr. Rizal. For the first half, we talked about the life of Dr. Rizal, and the second half, we are going to talk about the works of Dr. Rizal. Okay, so that's it for this recorded video. I will not be asking an output out from this one. I just want you to reflect to this one. This is a personal reflection for everybody about the annotation of Antonio Morga, Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Maybe a note for everybody. What are your takeaways out from this recorded video? There. What are your annotations out from this recorded video? If you are to share to everybody, what can you suggest, no, or what are your takeaways in this recorded video? Now, I'll be posting this in the Google Classroom, and you can actually add private comments in the Google Classroom or even in YouTube account, in the YouTube account, in the comment section of your takeaways out from this recorded video. This is enlisted, don't worry, this is in an enlisted format, and I guess I cannot benefit from the different recorded video, but I just would like to share it in YouTube because there is a promo in a particular network that surfing using YouTube is embedded already or free already in the data consumption. So mo na akong di-target ni naa siya sa YouTube na format. Anyways, um, again, I would like to hear your different takeaways from this recorded video, from this annotation of Dr. Sarizal of Antonio Morga, Success de las Islas Filipinas. Okay, so that's it for this recorded video. Thank you very much for watching and for listening me. Okay, BIT 3A2, 3D1, and 3D2. I hope you're all well and in good condition today. And of course, wherever you are, whoever you are with, amping kanunay everyone. Bye and see you in the next recorded video.